June 1st, 1987, 7:20 in the evening. The light is starting to die over Shuteye Peak, a granite ridge buried deep in California's Sierra National Forest, 25 miles northeast of Bass Lake. Somewhere on that mountain is a 16-year-old girl from Fresno named Theresa Ann Bier. She skipped school that morning. She told her friends exactly where she was going and exactly what she was going to look for. She was never seen again. And when the man she went up that mountain with finally came back down alone, he gave investigators an explanation that no detective in Fresno County had ever heard before. An explanation that 39 years later still sits in the case file. He said Bigfoot took her. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight's case is one of the strangest missing persons files ever opened in the state of California. And unlike most stories in this genre, almost nothing in it needs to be exaggerated. The date is real, the mountain is real, and the police report is real. The Sasquatch claim wasn't invented by a YouTuber or a tabloid. It was made by the last person to see Theresa alive, to actual law enforcement during an actual criminal investigation. It was reported by the wire services at the time. And it's the reason this case has haunted investigators for almost 4 decades. Before we climb into the Sierra, do us a favor and hit subscribe. Cases like this one deserve to stay in the light. Now, let's go back to the spring of 1987. Theresa Ann Bier was 16 years old, living in Fresno, California. Her childhood had not been easy. She'd spent years being moved between homes, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. By 1987, she was staying with a family acquaintance while attending Central High School. People who knew her described a girl who struggled in class, but who was trusting, curious, and hungry for something bigger than the life she'd been handed. And in the spring of 1987, something bigger found her. Through her living situation, Theresa had recently met a man named Russell Welch. Everyone called him Skip. He was 43 years old, 27 years older than Theresa. He was a house painter who lived mostly off disability checks, and Skip Welch had one all-consuming obsession: Bigfoot. Welch didn't treat Sasquatch as a campfire story. He described himself as a student of the creature. He told people he'd seen it, not once, but many times. And according to what detectives would later say, Welch claimed something even stranger. He claimed he had ongoing contact with an entire tribe of these creatures, living in the high country of the Central Sierra. To a sheriff's deputy, that sounds like delusion. But put yourself in the shoes of a 16-year-old girl who'd never been given a single adventure in her life. A grown man is telling you he knows where the most famous mystery in America lives, and he's offering to take you there. That doesn't sound like delusion. That sounds like the best day of your life. On the morning of Monday, June 1st, 1987, Theresa got ready for school like it was any other day, but it wasn't. Her friends later told investigators she'd already confided the plan to them. She wasn't going to class. She was going to the mountains to look for Bigfoot. Welch picked her up that morning, and the two of them drove out of Fresno, up Highway 41 into the foothills, past Bass Lake, and then deeper onto the forest roads that climb towards Shuteye Peak. Understand what this terrain is. This isn't a county park. Shuteye Peak sits at over 8,300 feet, ringed by granite domes, old-growth timber, and drainages that swallow experienced hikers. In 1987, there were no cell phones, no GPS, no trail cameras. Once you left the pavement, you were simply gone from the world. The last confirmed moment anyone can put a timestamp on is 7:20 p.m. that evening. Theresa Bier alive on that mountain as the sun went down. What happened in the hours after 7:20, we only have one man's word for, and his word kept changing. Here's the first detail that makes investigators' skin crawl. Welch didn't come down the mountain that night. He didn't come down the next day either. He returned to Fresno days later. Alone. He didn't walk into a sheriff's station. He didn't call a ranger district. The alarm was raised around him. A missing girl, an absence from school. Questions that started stacking up. When deputies finally sat Russell Welch down, they asked the only question that mattered. Where is Theresa? His first answer was simple. She ran away from him, he said. Just took off into the woods. But that story didn't hold. Under continued questioning, Welch's account shifted. And then it transformed into the version that would make this case infamous. Theresa hadn't simply run off, he now said. They had encountered something up there. And Theresa had been taken, forcibly taken, by Sasquatch. Let that settle for a second. This is not folklore filtered through 40 years of retelling. This is the documented statement of the last person to see a missing child, given to law enforcement during an active investigation. A wire report from that fall put it in plain black and white. Welch told authorities that the legendary ape man had taken the girl. Search efforts went up the mountain. Deputies, volunteers, terrain teams working the drainages around Shuteye Peak. And here is the second detail that keeps this file open. They found nothing. Not a shoe, not a backpack, not a strand of hair. In wilderness cases, searchers almost always find something. A discarded layer, a track, a disturbance in the brush. The mountain gave back nothing at all. On June 11th, 1987, 10 days after Theresa was last seen, Fresno County authorities arrested Russell Welch. The charge was child stealing. Without a body, without physical evidence, without a witness, it was the only charge they could make stand. And then, in the fall of 1987, the case took the turn that nobody saw coming. 3 days before Welch was scheduled to stand trial, prosecutors dropped the charge. They released him. They put him back on the street. Now, if you followed true crime for any length of time, you know prosecutors don't abandon a case against the last person to see a missing minor because they stopped caring. The reason reported at the time was colder and far more calculated than that. Double jeopardy. If they burned their one shot on a child stealing conviction and lost, they could never come back. But if Theresa was ever found, if evidence ever surfaced on that mountain, they wanted the ability to charge Russell Welch with murder. In other words, in the fall of 1987, the state of California quietly told us what it believed happened on Shuteye Peak. It just couldn't prove it. And here's the detail from that same reporting that nobody can explain away. Detectives who interviewed Welch were hardened investigators. They assumed they were listening to a cover story, but they came away saying something unsettling. They said Welch apparently sincerely believed it. The Bigfoot account wasn't delivered like an alibi, it was delivered like a memory. So what actually happened to Theresa Ann Bier? 4 theories have fought over this case for 39 years. Walk through them with me, because every single one of them has a hole in it. Theory 1. She ran away. It was Welch's first story, and on paper it fits. A 16-year-old with an unstable home life and every reason to want a different one. But runaways resurface. They contact a friend, they use a name, they leave a paper trail. Theresa never did. Not in 1987, not in the decades since. And runaways don't typically launch their new life from 8,000 feet of roadless granite at nightfall, 25 miles from the nearest town. If she ran into a place that no one runs out of. Theory 2. She got lost and the mountain took her. The Sierra kills people every single year. Exposure, falls, hypothermia. A June night at that elevation can drop near freezing. It's the most ordinary explanation, and the search teams treated it as the most likely one. But it collides with the same wall. The searchers found nothing. No remains in the drainages, no gear, no scavenger. Scatter in the years after. The wilderness is brutal, but it's rarely this clean. Theory 3. Foul play. This is the theory the prosecution's own strategy points to. It's why they preserved the murder option, instead of cashing in a lesser charge. A 43-year-old man takes a 16-year-old girl he barely knows into deep wilderness. He comes back days later without her, and he changes his story under questioning. Investigators searched for evidence that Welch had harmed her, and this has to be said clearly. They found none. No physical evidence, no confession. Welch was never tried, never convicted, and he maintained his account to the end. So the theory that satisfies every detective instinct is also the theory with zero proof behind it. That's not a technicality. That's the entire reason this case is still open. And then there's theory 4, the one that was sitting in the police file before any of us ever made a video about it. The account of the only eyewitness on that mountain. that something came out of those trees, and it took her. Nobody serious is asking you to convict a cryptid, but sit with the genuinely strange shape of this case for a moment. The claim wasn't invented after the fact by storytellers. It was the suspect's statement during the investigation, delivered with what detectives described as apparent sincerity. The man making it had spent years telling people he knew these creatures, a whole tribe of them in that exact stretch of the Sierra. And the area he chose is not random on the map of American Sasquatch lore. The Central and Southern Sierra are the same high country that produced decades of reported sightings. The same high country where hunters at a remote camp in the early 1970s captured strange vocal recordings that researchers argue about to this day. A true believer, a mountain wrapped in 50 years of sighting reports, a girl who went up to find the legend and never came down. You see the problem? Every rational theory leaks, and the irrational one is the only account we were ever given. Theresa Ann Bier has now been missing for 39 years. She would be in her 50s today. Her case remains open with Fresno County. She's still listed in national missing persons databases. And as recently as 2025, investigators and journalists were reopening the file, re-interviewing witnesses, pulling old police reports, retracing that drive up past Bass Lake. Still trying to answer the question deputies first asked in June of 1987. Russell Welch was never charged again. The murder case prosecutors preserved their right to bring was never brought. Whatever happened at 7:20 p.m. on June 1st, 1987, only 2 living beings witnessed it. And one of them told us a story the justice system had no box for. So I'll leave you where the case file leaves everyone who reads it. A girl walks into the Sierra hunting a legend. The legend is the official explanation for why she never walked out. And somewhere northeast of Bass Lake, under the granite shadow of Shuteye Peak, the mountain is still keeping its answer. What do you think happened to Theresa Ann Bier? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe cases like hers deserve to stay unforgotten, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the Sierra has more stories like this one, more than you'd think. Until next time, stay safe out there, and stay out of the deep timber after dark.